cannot have a welfare state and immigration. Whether you have open borders, but you then can't have a welfare state, or you have a welfare state, then you have to close your
It's
border.
actually a good point. Immigration, I mean, and the impact of immigration
That
on
is,
the...
Then
I
we
think,
back on the migration issue. So
Yeah, a very good point. I didn't tell you.
really, so I thought we discuss
No, really.
the market economy.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
okay,
is.
but the impact of
It
migration on
is.
social cohesion and solidarity, I don't know.
I think when you say about what Milton Friedman said,
Yeah, that's right. But
very, very.
so I thought we can discuss. I was the rapporteur regarding migration in Germany, so we can do this. But I think in every panel we move so fast to migration.
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
no, no.
Soziale Marktwirtschaft or social
you're
German
right.
economy
We'll
is
try
such
to
a
keep it
wide
one.
field,
Yeah.
and to only give one focus on migration.
No, it's
that
only
is
that.
not what
No,
you're
I
right.
think it would be good
it's
to really
just that
focus,
this-
because otherwise it's everything and
is-
nothing.
yeah.
Okay.
That this hot topic,
Always the risk.
So,
migration.
shall we start?
Uh,
I think we can get going. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Federico Tavioreo. I am Strategic Coordinator and Research Officer at the Martin Center for European Studies. But I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Martin Center, of course, but also I take the freedom, I hope Markus allows me to welcome you on behalf of the Untitled Stiftung, which is actually in charge, was specifically in charge of this panel, whose title you have read. It's the Social Market Economy Under Pressure, Balancing Solidarity and Competitiveness. I wanted to start my very brief introduction with a quote, actually, which I think many of you will recognize this quote. The Union shall establish an internal market. It shall work for the sustainable development of Europe based on balanced economic growth and price stability, a highly competitive social market economy, aiming at full employment and social progress, and a high level of protection and improvement of the quality of the environment. This, I'm sure many of you recognize it. It's Article 3 of the Treaty on European Union as modified by the Lisbon Treaty in 2009. So in 2009, the social market economy became part of the EU institutional framework somehow. Became, we could say, the official economic model of Europe. And when we talk about the European social and economic model, we may mean the social market economy, but we will see that things are more complicated than that. The discussion, I think, is interesting on two levels. It is interesting conceptually because this is a concept that profoundly evolved over time and changed its meaning many times. It was born, I'm sure some of the speakers will say it was born as a neoliberal, in fact, a concept in the 1930s and 40s in German circles. It became very influential in Germany in the late 1940s and then 50s and 60s. Already in the 1960s, it was very important in framing EU competition policy, but at the time it was very closely linked with an agenda of market liberalization with elements of social protection, with minimal elements of social protection. And then it evolved over time. And by the end of the century, it became a very consensual word, which basically meant our currently existing social systems characterized by market economy. We are not socialist economies, but we have high levels of social protection at the same time. So it is conceptually interesting for this story. It is, I think, politically interesting because we are at a critical juncture, as you know, in many fields, and both at the national level and at the European level, we are having a debate about the future of our economic and social systems. At the national level, you will remember the famous sentence by Angela Merkel that she repeated around every time, at the time of the Euro crisis, with these three famous numbers, right? 5, 20, 50. 5% of the world population, 20% of the world GDP, over 50% of the world social expenditure, and many measures taken during the Euro crisis aim to reduce this percentage of social expenditure and maybe weaken the protective solidarity dimension of the social market economy. And it is very interesting for the European debate, because as you know, we are having a debate on the future of Europe. We had a whole panel about that. And an important element of it is the discussion of what is the role, if at all, of the European level in the provision of social policy. 1 year ago, the Commission launched the European Pillar of Social Rights. What do we make of it? Is it part of the social market economy? So we are having, there is a white paper of the Commission on the topic with some very ambitious scenarios in it. So I'm sure that there will be an occasion to somehow approach all of this in the ensuing debate. The way we are going to do it is we are going to have a kickoff speech by Tobias Zech, former MP from the CSU, the Bavarian member party of the EPP. So I'll give you some biographic outlines of Mr. Zech before he takes the floor. I think you studied business. You were very active in German politics since a young age. I read here that you have been district chairman of the Junge Union in Alt-Tütting. I visited Alt-Tütting last summer, a beautiful city where the herds of the Wittelsbach ruling family are preserved. And from 2013 to 2017, you were a member of the German Bundestag, I think in the employment specifically, a committee, if I remember correctly.
Social and labor affairs.
Social, sorry. And also from 2014 to 17, a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So I think you can give us a bit the framework for the ensuing discussion, explain what the social market economy is, what are maybe some of the challenges that it is facing, and if you want, you may hint at some of the solutions. So I give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much to the Untitled Stiftung to invite me. Yes, to my biography, everything is true. I started this year. I have my 20 years anniversary in, as a guy in the business, because I started my professional career 1998 with a vocational training as a food retailer. So Edeka is one of the biggest food retailer companies in Germany, and I started my professional career. And then I went to the army. I was 8 years in the army, started business. So in the last period, in the last term of the German parliament, I was in the group of the 5% of the youngest parliamentarians, and at the same time in the group of the 5% of the parliamentarians with the most job experience. So it's also a nice situation. Now I'm back in business, work for a European, pure European company. I work for Airbus. I was in Airbus before, and now after I left the parliament because I lost the election on the list, this was the situation in Bavaria. No list candidate had the possibility to enter the parliament. I'm back in the business, and in the last 4 years I was, in the Council of Europe. I was the vice chairman of the EPP group in the Council of Europe, so I had a very strong focus on foreign policy. And also was in the Committee on Development and Business Collaboration in Germany, and the other 50% of my time I spent in social and labor policies in politics in Germany. I was in the Committee for Social and Labor, and I was, beside other topics, the rapporteur regarding migration. This was 2013. I was announced as rapporteur for migration. This was before everything started in Europe. And the topic is social market economy under pressure. And the question was, can I explain the social market economy? I cannot, because we have 90 minutes. We're discussing not only economic system, we're discussing a very strong system of systems. It's not only regarding economy, it's not only regarding participation, or how can we steer workers' council or workers or trade unions. It's a system. But I can give you a few remarks along the text we were invited. And the first is the social market economy under pressure? Yeah, of course it is. Every system is permanent under pressure. Every market is permanent under pressure. This is one of the core points of a market that we have to achieve, and that we are always in a competition. And I don't think we have a social market economy in Europe. I don't even think we have a common understanding what means social market economy. I don't even think every member state, including UK, have the target to become a social market economy. So, but we have put it in this phrase, 2009, in the Lisbon Treaty. This is a good target for Europe because we made very good experiences in Germany, and so all my remarks belongs to my experience in Germany as a German parliamentarian. And one point or one explanation in the text was this model was established to achieve growth through participation and a balance of competition and solidarity. Yes. But the main topic of the social market economy is balance. The balance between competition and solidarity. And to keep this balance, you need tools. And one tool is the participation with workers' union, but for the participation in workers' council in companies, it's one tool. But it's not, it's one pillar. It's a powerful pillar, and we achieved, or we are so successful also during the financial crisis in Europe, with very less effects on the German economy, on the labor market. If you compare Germany with Spain, with Portugal, with Italy, with other countries in Europe, because we have such a strong participation of employees in Germany. Because it's a strong tool in Germany to, in a mindset of balancing, avoid crisis in our economy and find a common approach to handle this crisis or upcoming crises, and find also a common approach to improve the German economy. But it's not all. You need, for such a system, a clear role model for politicians. Don't interact in every economy topic. So it's a framework system. We have to frame, we have to give borders on the left and on the right corner, on the left and on the right border, but don't regulate everything. We don't have, if we follow the idea, the methods, the ideology of the social market economy, we don't have to jump into business processes to rescue one single company. But we did in Germany. Of course we did, because we are politicians. We cannot stop. But with a core focus on the theory, we haven't. But we have to give rules how companies can interact together, and how also the society with companies, with the political level, can state and can support the growth of the business in Germany. And it's not only participation, it's more the opposite to a laissez-faire economy system, and it's also the opposite to a socialist economic system, what we had also in some parts of the European Union before. So it's a new, not new, but after the Second World War, it was a new approach to steer economy, because it's you need one, or it's, let me say in other words, social market economy is based on solidarity, yes. It's based on balance, yes, but it's definitely based on democracy. You cannot use this tool, you cannot use social market economy without democracy. It's impossible. And now we are in a competition, not only in a competition between regions in Europe, not only in a competition between companies in Europe and in the world, not only in a competition how can we achieve free trade agreements with sub-regions, or also if you think about TTIP with the United States. We also in a competition of systems. And it's not clear, and it was clear 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, before everything started to become so mad, it was clear that the Western idea of democracy, our way doing business, is the best in class, is the best in the world, and so every country in the world who want to become so rich, so wealthy, we Western states have to also become a democracy. This was our common, let me say, a little bit provocative, also in Brussels, our common understanding. Yet, we did it. Yeah? We did it. Everything after the fall of the Soviet Union, we did it. Now the war is, we won the war. Yeah? Every country in the world will become a democracy. I had a friend of mine. He is a diplomat in the Communist Party in China. And 2 years ago, after 3-4 beers in Beijing, he asked me, so Tobias, can we have a private jet? Please put your cell out, a private jet. Yes, okay. Can we talk about democracy? So, yes. After years lobbying this guy, now he will become a real Democrat. And then, Tobias, I have so many concerns. Yeah, please. I will answer every question. With Greece and with all the debts, with your democracy, you never will achieve to steer this Europe. With election, it's like a shuffle mode. Can we help you? Can we explain you our system of selection? Because it's also a kind of election, yeah? A little bit smarter. Maybe we can train you and support you to become more or use the tool of selection instead of election. So, little story. So then we took a last beer and then I went to bed. But this is reality. We are in a competition between systems. I believe we have a very strong economic system. And our economic system based 100% on democracy. And so the question, is our system under pressure? Yes, it is. And it will ever be, because this is a part of the economic system. We are always in competition, but we have a very strong system and we have to defend it. But it's not only done with participation. It's not only done with a smart approach to regulation. You also need low inflation, low unemployment rate, and this was, okay, I will come to an end, so the first signal comes. And also good working conditions, health insurance, health or protection of the workers and social welfare. And so it's a very complex tool and a very complex system. What are the current challenges, the current changes? Yes. In Germany, so we had the election last year. Beside the migration topic, I think two challenges also for us politicians to explain it to the people is still globalization. I don't know how familiar you are with the German discussion regarding TTIP. It was a pity. We founded the first free trade agreement as Germany, and we have still more than 168 free trade agreements. The first we founded 1956 with Pakistan. It's still in charge for some goods. And we had a discussion in Germany whether it's the right way with the United States of America to go for a free trade agreement. It was a very hard discussion. So because globalization is still a topic, not only in Germany, also in Europe, also as a threat for the support and the beliefs in our social market economy. And the second is, also in the public discussion, digitalization. First, globalization, digitalization. And there are so many rumors, and if you ask a scientist what will happen to the labor market with the digitalization, how many jobs will vanish, yeah, do we need a social-driven labor market to keep these guys who will all lose their jobs? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, don't put them all in a leisure working market, and we have to spend more money on this issue. I disagree. I think the digitalization is a benefit for Europe, and it's a big threat for China and India, because with digitalization, with tools like a 3D printer, with more service orientation of the business, what we less need in future, as you compare it with the past, is cheap labor costs in China or cheap labor costs in India. So it's a threat for India, it's a threat for China. It could be a chance for Europe to re-import jobs, blue-collar jobs to Europe. But then we have to be agile. We have to be always work on this system. This social market economy is not founded as a system without any changes. We have to always work on it, not kill the core and the heart, but work on the border, work on the frame, and put this system in the next generation. Then I think we will all see a very good future for the economy in Europe. But we don't have a social market economy in every 28 Europe states. And let me go back what I said before. There is maybe a common understanding of the phrase, but no common understanding of the meaning. So everybody has his own explanation regarding social market economy. I spoke about the German view. I think the system is a good system, also for Europe, but if we want to implement such a system, there are so many barriers in front of us. Think about the discussion about the minimum salary in the eastern part of Europe regarding what we did in Germany. It was a high diplomatic crisis with Poland as we founded the minimum salary in Germany, because Polish MPs thought we want to protect our own market. So it's not so easy. There are many barriers. Also, many barriers regarding the labor law, the collective and the individual labor law, but this is politics, these are the challenges. If you find a common narrative regarding what we want to establish in Germany as a social market, and then I think we can establish and improve the social market economy in all European states. Not now, not this year, not next year, but in upcoming times. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Tobias. Something to retain, 2 points from my understanding. You stress particularly on the German model of social market economy. What you call Mitbestimmung, the participation of workers to firms' decision. And I have a follow-up questions later on after we initiate the panel discussion on that. And if I may summarize the order, the constitutional framework of rules that regulate society as to the challenges, global competition and digitalization you raise particularly. I will now move to my left to Gabriele Bischoff, who is, I think your current position is the head of the European Policy Department of the Federal Executive of the German Confederation of Trade Unions. But you have a long career advising on social policy and equality issue, both as a researcher. You started at the Berlin Institute for Social Research. You have worked in the private sector, which is always an interesting perspective to have. IG Metall Germany, you were a senior advisor for equality there. You have been in the permanent representation of Germany as social attaché in Brussels, responsible for social dialogue. So I think you have a rather broad overview on this topic. There was something that I found interesting and striking in what Tobias was saying, is that there is no such thing as a social market economy in Europe. The European countries don't agree about that, and yet there are some attempts at constructing some form of European social policy. There are discussions on social policy at the European level. So I would like you to react to Tobias' kickoff, but maybe also to start introducing the European dimension of this debate.
Yes. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I have to say I changed since 2 years my position, and I'm still connected to the DGB, but I'm the president of the workers group in the Economic and Social Committee here in Brussels. You know, this is an advisory committee for the EU institutions to advise from the perspective of the three groups, the employers, the workers, and the other parts of civil society, on legislation from a very down-to-earth experience people have, and to see, are these legal proposals and initiatives fit for purpose, or do we think they should be amended? I smiled a little bit when I listened to your introduction, quoting or starting with Article 3. We did an opinion as the committee on this proposal of the Commission on the social pillar. Pillar of social rights. You know, this is a key initiative of Commissioner Juncker, and the three groups, and you can imagine between employer organizations, trade unions, and civil society is not so easy, but we realized that this is a key initiative to regain trust of citizens. And we took Article 3 as our introduction into this opinion, because we thought it is really the attempt to define what we in Europe, in the European Union, understand with this term social market economy. And it is this balance between, on one hand, aiming at social progress, but on the other hand, also to stress that it is a highly competitive economy. From a German perspective, this is never a contradiction. But it is good on European level to see that we have different perceptions here. But we, as the committee, we saw and supported this initiative because you can see that we have, with the EU crisis and all the measures in the member states with huge impact, especially in certain countries. If you look at youth unemployment in Greece and Spain, half of the young population excluded. If you look at growing poverty, also especially of pensioners in many countries, you could see that, and I think this is an important category too, this question of convergence and divergence in Europe. How much divergence can we digest? How much convergence do we need in Europe so that the European Union can work, and especially also the Eurozone, and can be stronger than it is now? For us, and this was mentioned also, so we had this development in certain countries. It increased the divergences and the situation, and I agree, we have very different systems. We have if you look at, for example, the Netherlands and other countries with very high level of social spending per head, sort of, and very low in Romania, for example, or the Baltic states. Big differences here. Also, we could see when the crisis measures started, that when you already had high levels of youth unemployment in general, that it increased much faster, and there were not so much safeguards in some countries. Nevertheless, we, on top of this, we realize we have new debates on the effects of digitalization. Not everyone is just optimistic as you are. There are different studies, and we had a look at it, if it's Osborne or Fry or whatever, but it's like a glass bowl. I mean, really, it's estimations. They all have are interesting, but they will not see. But what we can see is we will lose jobs and we will gain new jobs. And we have to address this challenge of the transformation. How do we get people really then, because we also, to be competitive, we need the qualifications, we need qualified personnel. How can Europe, for example, support these transitions that have to be there? And on top of this, what we in German call Angst issue, is the question of globalization. There is more and more a realization that people profit very different from globalization. And that we also here, we lose jobs, we gain jobs in other parts. And I mean, Trump, but also already the Brexit, was a bit of a warning signal also for the European Union to realize we have a problem here, we have to address it. This was the setting why the pillar of social rights was introduced, to say, especially in these areas, fair working conditions. We need new initiatives also because we have new risks, and we have certain parts of people that are excluded from what we call good work. More and more precarious work in different sectors and in different countries. And people need a certain level of protection to address the challenges of the future. I think, therefore, the slogan of this commission to say we want an EU that protects and enables its citizen is the right approach. And on the other hand, social protection for all, because we have new kinds, if you, for example, we address this in our opinion, the question of future of work. And we have more and more people, for example, in Europe that are not employed in a general say, but on platforms compete for certain tasks. These people have no social protection. If you have more and more people like this, you can already see what problems you create into the future. In terms of they will not have a pension, they will not be protected in times of crisis. And this also imposes big risks. For example, if you have one currency, you have certain rules we have. And therefore, this question is very important to address it and to find European solutions. And also, you said we don't have to regulate all. For us, the future of work is the perfect example where national legislation wouldn't work. These platforms don't operate national. They operate Europe-wide and worldwide. So if you would have a perfect solution in Portugal, maybe this would not help anymore. So here, and this is also linked to the question of tax policies we have, because we don't have not only ways of social dumping or wage dumping, we also have tax dumping, and this is something that has to be addressed. I mean, we just heard that Amazon now transferred money and that we have to find fair solutions, because I think if you ask workers in Germany or in Portugal or wherever in Poland, what do they expect? They work hard, they want a good job where they can have a decent style of living, and they want a good education for their children, and they want to have a good health system here to be protected. And I think if Europe would not be able to deliver a framework where wherever you live in Europe, this is the joint setting, what we call the European social model. It is not just about values. It is the security, what in German we call the pitfalls of life, that you have a job and then maybe you get sick or you lose your job, that you know you will not just be not protected at all. Therefore, we identified also two priorities for Europe. One is that Europe could set standards for a minimum income. What do we mean? We don't mean that we say everyone should have 2,000 euro, but we still have countries, once you were unemployed and you get maybe for 1 year an unemployment protection, afterwards there's no other protection. You could say, okay, that is a national decision. But for example, if this country is a member of the Eurozone, and in times of crisis, we realize that this can be a risk. And the other one is also to see the development of the basic line like minimum wages for people in Europe by not setting one, because this is done very differently. We have the autonomy of social partners that is going to be protected, but to have some goals to say for example, from OECD and ILO, the 60% of the median wage, and to say, okay, at least you have to show how you try to reach this, because Europe can only work if it's fair. It can only work also if all member states know they have a common market, but you don't profit on the cost of the others. This is also solidarity. You give in and you get and you balance it. And my last thing is, I find it very interesting to discuss also the definition of competitiveness. In Europe, we have a totally different perception. And I often wonder that we, on European level, we have a very limited perception of competitiveness. I mean, it's just not about cost. It's about infrastructure. It's about investment in training. I mean, if you look at the countries that are the most competitive or that had the best and fastest way to get out of the crisis, it were the countries that have good social development models, that have a good social dialogue, and also at the same time that have a good inclusion policy, especially for the people in the margins of the labor market and with the most problems.
Thanks a lot, Gabriele. I would maybe summarize 3 points that maybe we should discuss further on the panel later on. First of all, the European Pillar of Social Rights. I think it's an important issue. I have some follow-up questions for you later on. The emphasis on some of the possible negative disruptive side of digitalization, the fourth industrial revolution, if you wish. And the third issue, this trade-off, this dilemma between convergence and divergence. How much convergence should be enforced from the center? I think these are all issues that we will come back to discuss. But before that, I should give the floor to Günther Ederer, and I should present him briefly. He is an economic journalist in Germany, Bavarian born. He started his career in Südwestfunk in Baden-Baden. He was in Asia for a long time. He was in Southern Europe, he was telling me, so he knows Italy, Greece very well. Since 1984, he became independent. He's an independent journalist, and you are a film producer. You have produced many films, and you're telling me, especially New Zealand, for example, you were very stricken by their economic and social model. Maybe you can tell us something about that. But I go back to something that Tobias said. He said that the social market economy is the opposite of the market economy and of the socialist economy. It's a third way. So do you agree with that? What is your view of the matter?
No, I wouldn't quite agree with that. I'm a rare species because my fondness of the market economy was not out of books or theories, but in the countries I worked. I made films about economy in 64 countries, and the easy summary is, as more market-driven this country and the economy in this country was, as more prosperous it was, as less divided in poor and in rich. So I think, in some ways, I agree with the two speakers before me. In other ways, I think it stayed a little bit on the upper level, because the real difference between, and we use already the words social economy, market economy, the real difference is what is the base of it, what is driving us to set up rules and regulations. So the word already, social market economy, everybody can agree is now very easily. Everybody wants to be social, and we pretend that we have still a market. If you look very close to our products and to where we live in, you'll find there's almost nowhere anymore a free market. It's always put in rules and regulations, in subsidies and whatever. So the emphasis on this depends how you look at it. Is it on market or is it on social? And the result is that because it's such a weasel word, we all can talk about very easily about social market economy as the driving force for Europe? Well, in my experience, I said because of the way we in Germany started after the Second World War with market economy. The word social, as it was originally thought of, was that a market economy is already social in itself because the prices are set by the market and not by bureaucrats. And the moment bureaucrats decide what is the price, what is good for others, it's distorting. Who is driving the bureaucrats or the politicians? Take the European agrarian market. It started with Siggo Mansholt, and he demanded a total planification. What happened with this total planification in our market economy? Milk seas, butter mountains, pork fields. We had always, the decisions had to be changed because the impact on the market was that we had overproduction, underproduction, and the most idiotic thing finally was that we had overproduction with subsidized products, which we then subsidized to export and destroy even markets abroad again. I mean, this is our so-called market economy, agriculture, where I would say there's nothing left. It's our farmers at about 50% are employees of the state. We get about 50% of their income is a handout from the state, and take it away and you lose your next election. That's why nobody will touch it. You mentioned New Zealand. New Zealand did it. New Zealand really killed all subsidizes, even for the farmers. At the end, now when I was there, the farmer said, we never want to have subsidizes again, because now we are free farmers, we can decide on our own. We never want to be under control of the state again. Free social market economy, if you put the emphasis on distributing goods, values, money, then I think it's misleading from the original thinking. The original thinking is a principle of freedom of the market, and this unites with the social balance in this framework. Driven is the economy by individuals, which create on their own free will decisions in a freely selected profession. And there we get more valuable goods. So it's based on the free decisions in the free of individuals. I always ask people when they say, yeah, but we have to nationalize or we have to recall the privatization. I said, so who is then making the decision? If you ask, at least in Germany, I think it's true for almost all other countries, if you ask, what do you think of your politicians? No. Politicians are last bunch. Also, I said it doesn't matter. It's about the same class as journalists in their how you look at politicians. And so you mean the bureaucrats in the city hall or in the ministry is the one who makes the decisions? No, bureaucrats shouldn't make the decision either. So who makes the decision? You want the state to make it, but if you come down to who makes it, you disguise these people who make it. So why do you think it's better you make your decision by your own? And now you would say, where do we then help people who got unemployed by, or said, in the original idea of the market economy of Ludwig Erhard, the social attitude was to help disabled, physical or mentally disabled people, or to help people in the need if their company closes down and to find a new job, to open up but not to close, not to give handouts. And that's what I'm afraid right now. Under market economy, we understand an organized welfare state, and this organized welfare state, as more welfare it's handing out, I would say at least it's functioning. As more open a society, as more price setting by market is implemented, as more successful it will be. And I hope I can, for example, in a future discussion, some more examples how contradicting things are as we do. For example, we think that cigarettes are unhealthy, so we tax them very high. But at the same time, we give subsidies to tobacco farmers. Sugar beets. We finance sugar beet growing in Europe with enormous sums. But now we want to tax sugar because it's unhealthy. I mean, here you can say, if you leave it to bureaucrats, if you leave it to politicians, their main attitude is, and I don't blame them for it, they want to be re-elected. And so I think it's better to find ways to create value, and then we tax this value added tax, because this is the income of the state, but we don't finance handouts.
Thanks a lot. So 3 points here too. The notion of social, which is a very ambiguous notion on which there are different interpretations. You say, in the original idea of Erhard, Müller-Armack, Röpke, this was about the embeddedness of markets, the natural embeddedness of markets in society. It was not about, it was the very fact that the process was not controlled by the state that made the social market economy social. Second point, the fact that, well, the use of the term has changed. Now for us, the social market economy is basically the welfare state. So the two terms are almost interchangeable. And the third point, which I think it's also a very fair point, there is very little market left in many areas of our life when, for example, our states consume, tax away in some countries over half of the national income and use it for various things, or you made the example of the common agricultural policy. But before I can move into follow-up questions on these issues, I know that Gabriele has to leave early. So we have around maybe 10, 15 minutes left with Gabriele. We should maximize the time with her. What I would propose is that we open up to questions specifically to Gabriele now so that she can answer the questions before she leaves. And then we continue with the other two speakers for the remaining time. So I already see some hands up. Could you please? 1, 2, oh, okay. So I would say, let's start from the gentleman here who was the first. Please raise your hands because we take 2 or 3 at a time. The lady there and the lady here. First round. Then we'll have time for a second round, don't worry.
Is it? Oh, okay. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Antonia Munz from the VDA, the German Car Association. And I have a general question because actually I attended an event yesterday about social Europe as well, and they were talking about a level playing field. That was a term they mentioned quite often. And I was interested because when different member states have similar standards or one common standard, then would that mean that other member states who might have or who do have already higher standards, does that mean they have to come down to that lower standard, or what kind of standard are we talking about? Do we introduce a German standard to other member states as well, and then or does Germany have to get down to a certain standard? Thank you.
The gentleman there and then the lady here. There will be time for a second round of war. Many more rounds, but with Gabriele, at least one more.
Hello, it's Álvaro Lear from the ULB, the university. My question is, to what extent is possible to have a healthy welfare state without tackling inequality? Because it surprised me that you did not mention specifically inequality, and given the great divide between, let's say, the top 1% and basically everyone else, how can it be possible to have a healthy welfare state? Thank you.
And then there was a lady here, yes.
My name is Birta Begishwili from ICODA European Affairs. My question relates to the minimum wage and your proposal to make the minimum wage somehow standard within the countries of the European Union. If we do so, do you think that's going to go against the economic advantage of the countries who have a lower minimum wage, the rest have a cheaper labor force in the European Union?
Excellent questions, all the three. So I would say for the moment you can start answering them, and then probably the other two speakers should have a word about that. But please go ahead.
I start with Madame Munz from the BDR and your question and the level playing field. I mean, this was, and starting with the Rome Treaty, this was the idea, and it was the founders of the European Union saw that this is very essential, and for this, for example, the paragraphs on equality and between men and women, the intention of the French when we started the European Union or the European integration, to be more precise, also was that we need this level playing field in Europe, and therefore it was agreed. These standards. The essential thing about European social policy is that we only set minimum standards. We say we have very different social systems in the European Union, and to create this level playing field, we do minimum standards, and that gives the flexibility to countries that are much advanced to go beyond this, but we create at least a minimum level where we say all countries comply with this, and also we give this basic protection for people, be it in the working time question, which for a level playing field is very important, be it in terms of, for example, other questions in gender equality or whatever aspects we have there. And this is something that is very much debated in countries that have higher standards. It's on one hand the fear that this might have a negative pressure on the more advanced countries. But when we look, and we have very good evaluations of the complying with all the social regulations, there's a very good study of an Austrian university. We can see that this works quite well. There is no downward pressure really empirically to see in the countries that are more advanced than the others. There is a new debate about it, which is has the label gold plating, but this does not refer to minimum standards, but where we set one level of regulation, especially in common market issues, and there, I mean, member states cannot do on top of this. They really have to comply with it. And one key element of the proposal of President Juncker in the social pillar is the notion of upward convergence. And he said this is enshrined in the treaties, and this is what needs to be achieved, and we start from different levels, is then that we create upward convergence and not that we sort of, that the common market will lead to downward pressure. And I think it's very important to see also that, I mean, a common market is not a means in itself. And you can see that how the common market is perceived. It's a grand opportunity for all the countries, but at the same time, the purpose is to deliver for the people, to improve the living and working conditions of people in Europe. And if the common market does not provide this, it will not be supported. I mean, this is why this notion, no one falls in love with the common market, is still existing, and this has to be proved, and there are many challenges. But if the common market would not deliver this, or would it deliver only for few, it would not be supported. And you can see with the Brexit and the debate we had in the UK that this can happen quite quickly, that people have the perception that the European Union is not an advantage for them, but rather a disadvantage. The question on equality, yes. I mean, I mentioned it just briefly, but it is very, very important. And I think a healthy, I would even say a healthy society needs this sort of balancing and to see that we have that one of the biggest threats in our view is the growing inequalities. It really is a threat for democracy, because if you realize that there is no equality and inequality is rising, societies are threatened, and not only economies. And therefore, I mean, it was mentioned about the German system of, or perception of, a social market economy, is that you need a strong social dialogue, for example, especially to rebalance and to create a certain level also, for example, of income equality. And this is also an issue that is addressed in this pillar of social rights. And I have a different perception what the market is. I mean, when you look, you can see that this perception of a trickle-down effect automatically doesn't work. And therefore you need certain strong institutions that can address this. The minimum wage. The idea of having benchmarks in terms of, I mean, in more than 24 countries we have minimum wages. We have other countries, and also in my trade union family, if I talk to the Scandinavians about minimum wages, they look at me and say, hello, we are able to set our standards collectively, and we don't need minimum wages, but they're able to set the level via collective bargaining and a big coverage of collective bargaining. But in these countries, for example, that have minimum wages, we have very different levels. And what we have to realize also is that if we don't have it, and it doesn't mean that the competitiveness just via lower wages is not a sustainable one. And it creates also, I mean, if you look at the 4 freedoms, what we realize is that the European Union, with this upward convergence, the promise also to these countries and the people living and working there was that also their level of living standards will increase over time, not from one day or another one, but over the time. When you talk, for example, to the trade unions in these countries, you see, I will go this evening to Prague, for example, and the president of CEMCOS there, he said, if the wages increase in the same level as they did since we joined the European Union, even in 70 years, we will not have the same standard. And there is a it's not really discussed here in Brussels a lot or in Germany, but there's a growing dissatisfaction also in these countries that this is not taking place in the way that it was expected. So I think to have a level playing field here, and this means that if you take the 60% of the median wage, I mean, it's different in every country, and we almost have no country, I think, except France. Even Luxembourg doesn't match the 60% as a goal to achieve over time. And that would be then a process of upward convergence in all member states. Okay. But I think we have to address this question, because if we have a development that free movement is meant that every worker has the choice without being discriminated to work in other countries. But if you have a system, for example, where more and more people leave their country out of real economic pressure and because they cannot have a living in their own country, we create new problems because our common market, the free movement, was established in a way that it is very well and works very well if a certain percentage of people go to another country to work there. But if you have, for example, big waves of it, or if you, for example, have, like in the Baltic states, they really have problems to find qualified personnel, because if you have a good university degree in IT, for example, and you live in Estonia, and you take the ferry, fast ferry 1 hour to Finland, and you have 3 times the income you have in other countries, in the long run, this will not work, neither for the countries that have to experience the brain drain and they invested in the qualifications of these people, nor if you look then at Europe as a whole. So I think it will be important to focus also on upward convergence and creating good working and living conditions in all countries.
I'll bring you in on this. Okay, thanks a lot. 2 quick comments before. I think we can take a couple of more, and then. But I will give both of you the chance to comment on all these points. It's just that I want to maximize. I mean, the presence of Gabriele here. Two comments. I find it interesting that most of the arguments you make are actually not economic arguments, but political arguments. That when you say we need a level playing field, the argument is it's because people otherwise will not support the single market. On inequality, it's because it's a threat for democracy. So this is the first thing that I found interesting. And the second debate, and maybe here in the remainder we can have an exchange on that, most great federations in history, for example, the United States, do it very well without a level playing field. They don't discuss much. There are very high disparities of wealth between the different regions. So is there any short question left for Gabriele? I think, okay, we take 2 only. Jakub and the gentleman here, and then when I really need to give the floor to the other panelist.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Ider, I would like to ask you a question about disruptive technology. And
about what technology?
Disruptive technology,
okay, yeah.
Disruptive technologies. And concretely, how do you ensure social protection for workers working in these industries? Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question about, you mentioned social dialogue, and that it's important to have strong social dialogue, and also the challenges that we're facing currently. And so I was wondering, some of the unions also do not support the EU Pillar of Social Rights because it has negative connotations for their social systems, mainly in developed economies. What are you doing in internal discussions to persuade them to support your line? Thank you.
If I may, brief answers, please. Brief answers,
yes.
if I may ask.
The last one is easy. I mean, I am also a member of the executive of the European Trade Union Confederation. There is some skepticism that it's just an empty promise. But the absolute majority supports the social pillar. There was no one that had the perception that it would have a negative impact on their social system. There is some skepticism also that it is an empty promise. But I think with the last proposals, and that also is a question for the disruptive technologies, is, for example, there are 2 new legal proposals at the moment the Commission did. One is on fair and transparent working conditions, where especially also for platform workers, and the definition, what is a worker, is enlarged to find solutions to cover it. And the second one, it's unfortunately only a council recommendation, is the question of, can we enlarge social protection and certain forms of social protection for this group? And I think a very big debate that will be coming up only is on the transformations, and will Europe provide a new fund or a revised fund where they address much more if we have these disruptive technologies and job losses in certain areas, to invest in people and train them. And in my view and in our view, it would be very good if they could already anticipate changes and not wait until people are unemployed, but maybe also finance that while people are still employed, that in half of the time they can be trained so that they are able to find a good job, and also that the companies have qualified people they need to be competitive.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gabriele.
Thank you
for your contribution.
And I'm sorry I said it from the beginning, because today as a colleague said, is my Hans Day. I'm going to now the Hans Böckler Foundation, who has a conference here where I moderate a panel.
I understand.
But thank you very much, and have a very good debate.
Thanks a lot. So, back to the gentleman. There is a lot on our plate. There is a level playing field, there is inequality, there is minimum wage, there is disruptive technologies, there is a social dialogue and the European Pillar of Social Rights. Take your time, because you've been very patient, both of you. Pick what you want to answer, and I may come back with specific questions on some of these issues. We can start, maybe we can go this way with Günther and then Tobias.
First of all, I want to, this example with this well-trained IT specialist from Estonia is an example which is an argument for a free market. Because in the long run, this company in Finland will probably invest in Estonia. So, because there is enough well-trained staff under conditions which make it sense to invest. But why do many companies do not invest? Because of the legal situation. If in Spain you have to wait 3 years if you have a legal case before a judge is even willing to look at your case, you wonder if you should invest there. So it's not only the question of wages and training, it's also the question of the economical surrounding. And if you see the research centers who say who has the best investment quality, how do we start usually? Switzerland, Singapore, New Zealand, and then some Scandinavians. And you don't see the investment in Southern Europe. Even you should have there a lot of trained people, but the legal conditions are, or the environmental conditions are in a case that you do prefer not to invest. So I think this to try to equalize through social regulations will not work in the long run, but even will have a negative effect to all these countries which cannot compete yet. The second is when we talk about a labor market. In the lower income classes, there is no market, because how expensive is sand on the sea, which is there available unconditional. And the same is in lower income, in untrained labor. First of all, in Europe, we have some overpopulation, but with the inflow of refugees and with what we in Germany did with guest workers, as we call them, you imported millions of untrained people, and then you wonder why they don't have a price. You get them for nothing, so they are not worth very much. And I don't think that this development, as long as we encourage this kind of unconditional increase of unskilled worker, We will never have a market price, and we will not be able to protect them. I just saw another day a film about the tomato and orange pickers in southern Italy, which are slave conditions, and all the rules and regulations are there. You will not be able to compete against reality.
That's a nice close. You will not be able to compete against reality. Do you want to say anything on disruptive technologies, or maybe we go back to that later?
Only 3 remarks. So I see. I start with Gabriele. She mentioned a few times equality. I don't believe on social equality. It's impossible. You can have. We need social justice in states and nations. So I believe in a personal performance, and social market economy, in the German understanding, is driven by personal performance. Yeah, and this is the market inside the system, the personal performance. Yeah, we protect the weak, we frame the business, but it's driven by the personal performance. And so equality is against personal performance. Cannot work for me. But on the other hand, Günther Eder made 2 examples. I fully agree with 95% what you said, but 2 examples I will give 2 answers or 2 remarks. The first was, is there a free market? The gap between the poorest and the richest is less than in a regulated market. I understand. No, it's if you look to the States, it's not true. It's not true. So, free market is not, could be, but is not. There's no evidence to have this a small gap between the poor and the richest. If you look at the problems in the States, also after the last election, during the current debate in the States, interior politics, not only with North Korea, so there is more in Washington to discuss. This is one of the biggest issues. How can the social insurance system, there is no workable. How can the protection of the labor market work? So, I disagree with this sentence. I agree we need so much market as possible. So much market as possible, but with a clear framing. And the second was agriculture market New Zealand. Yes, indeed, on an island surrounded by water and koalas could workable to set the agriculture market free. But now I'm beside my job in the labor and social politics, I was a member of the part of the foreign politicians of Germany with core focus on security. After 2 world wars in Europe, I think we have also on some specific branches set a strategic interest, and one is beside defense, space, aerospace. Everybody, I think, would agree it's a strategic purpose, but also agriculture is a strategic purpose. So we have also to protect at least the possibility to produce in a permanent way enough food for the people in Europe. Don't be if we need a second, if we don't have second source, if we need imports, so the weakest situation of a state is if you have to import food or gas or energy. So we have still the situation in Europe. For us, this is a strategic branch, and we have to protect. I agree. We did a lot of mistakes in the past, but it's not only driven by politicians. Yes, it's right, politicians want to be re-elected. There's an intrinsic motivation. Journalists, Günther, want to sell their products, also their movies. So it's a moderator of a think tank want to have a nice discussion. Not
if you work for public finance television.
Yes, okay. Then not. Then maybe you search for viewers or not. So it depends. But so intrinsic motivation, yes. but I think we identified some mistakes. We will over identify also in the future some mistakes. But this is the job of politician. Sometimes to break rules. Because if we don't have to break rules as politicians, we don't need politicians, then civil servants can do everything. Yeah, then it's a standardized process. So politicians have the right to break rules or redefine rules. And the second is always try to improve the system. So only 3 remarks to the former discussion.
Thanks a lot. I think we can take a few more questions for sure. The gentleman here in the front row, Owen back there. And the lady here, I think we can take the 3 of them.
So. Yes, thank you. Working? No. Yeah. I just want to remark about the agricultural policy. We are talking about market economy, social market economy. And the big mistake what was done with the agricultural subsidies was that we guaranteed prices. We interfered in the market as such. We had overproduction. And if we want to keep, and I don't agree that you want to protect food that we can always eat. There are other systems. We can also import food. That's not a problem at all. And if there's a real crisis, we can plow the ground. That's the wrong answer. You should not interfere in the market system as such. The market, we need solidarity. When the coal and steel market the SECA was founded, the GKs, there was the principle of solidarity. We had huge structural changes in the coal and steel sector because of closed down the coal mines, of substitution of oil, and the steel factories. The SICA had a fund to help to overcome the structural changes. They even had money for the workers that they found a new job, etc. And what happened to America, what Trump said, these people were left alone. Those who didn't find a job, there was no structure. When we have the common market, we said we need regional aid. We have to help the regions so that they can compete. During all these years in the European Union, it has been forgotten. The rich region got money. They said, I want my money back. The system as such was diverted. I think the market economy, don't interfere too much, leave the markets to define the price, the scarcity measure of what is, and that's also for the labor market. And by the way, I don't fully agree with you that the Mitbestimmung in Germany is really the part of the social market economy. That we need a social dialogue.
In theory and in practice.
No, but what was at the time was what they wanted is Mitbestimmung at the same level as the investor. That would have been
we call it Deutschland AG, but it's different.
Okay, let's not enter into this specifically because it's off topic. But
I think it's the equal importance of capital and worker.
This is not
capital and labor. That's not the idea. Equivalent of capital and worker.
Okay. I think.
I don't agree.
It's not true.
Let's not. But if I may stress, I think you made 2 very pertinent points. If you read all the founders of the social market economy, one of the key principles was market conformity. And what they meant by market conformity was respect of the price system. And this is why they all, without exception, opposed minimum wages.
Yes.
Why? Because this is price fixing. It's fixing the price of labor. And they were all, without exception, opposed to the common agricultural policy. This is just a history. Rübke was extremely vocal on this with Erhard. Erhard had to support it because he was the chancellor, he was in politics, he was a politician, he had to be re-elected. But theoretically, there was no...
But he was a bad politician and therefore not re-elected. He was a very good economist.
He was a very good economist. So I think you made very pertinent points. Owen, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. Sorry, I missed about the first 10 minutes of the debate, so I hope this hasn't been covered before. But just looking at the title of this session, Social Market Economy Under Pressure, I would just like to ask the panel, do they agree with the statement that the current social market economy is totally unsustainable simply because of demographic change? The social market economy that we have now was perfect for 1958, but it's no longer fit for purpose for 2018. And my second question would be, inequality was mentioned briefly. But what about the role of the social market economy structures in actually institutionalizing generational inequality in much of Europe over the last 10 years, where you've got younger people who, understand perfectly how serious the situation is because they're 30 years old and can't get a permanent job, while we have an older generation, may I say often the most ardent defenders of the social market economy, who are looking very forward to their suitable retirement. Thank you.
Excellent points, thanks.
Katharina Wegner, I represent Church Organization of the Protestant Church here in Germany, Diakonia, Germany. I wanted to come back to the issue of social injustice or social inequalities in and between member states. I think that's a problem of missing social justice. And I wanted to come back to one of the comments you made as a moderator again. You said that Gabriela only described the political and social consequences of social inequalities, and I'm especially interested, and I don't know much about it, and I would like to have more in this discussion probably about the economic consequences, because I think that's a discussion we have to have, especially in the monetary union. Are there economic consequences because of a growing inequality, socially and economic, especially in a monetary union? If this is true, what would be the political consequences of that?
Okay, thanks. So I think we can go back to the panel and feel free to comment on the 3 points. We have the notion, well, the gentleman here, the issue of market conformity and the common agricultural policy, the idea that the current social market economy is unsustainable because of demographic change, the issue of generational inequality entrenched in currently existing welfare structures, for example, pension systems, and the economic consequences of inequalities. So I don't know whether you want to pick some, but at least, they should all be addressed by at least one of you.
I want to pick on that maybe the social market idea of 1948 now, under the present condition, cannot work anymore. I completely disagree. What is wrong that we empower individuals to be creative, create new ideas, found new companies, have the chance to develop? What is wrong with this idea? This will work every time. And then, of course, that's what the neoliberals said, we have to have a framework, crash barriers, which shows a border in which this creative development can happen. And I still think this is still true. Now when we talk about pension and inequality and all these things, these are results of the last 50 years, which I say have nothing to do with neoliberalism or whatsoever. The last 50 years were more and more interference in markets and setting up all kinds of programs which are supposed to help, but at the end we have more inequalities than before. So since we didn't have a social market in the way of the founders of this idea thought about it, but we had a social market more in the way that state interference was supposed to create this equality, which absolutely didn't happen. In one of my books, I wrote a chapter that save capitalism from the capitalists. I mean, why do we allow that in certain circles they can set up their own income? It's almost like robbery. And coming back to this participation didn't help at all. Because look at VW company. There's a worker council, once is involved in a mass prostitute circle. The next time they're involved in spending 10 million euro for a social democratic lady which worked there 1 year. The state attorney is searching the offices of the workers' council's boss because he made up to 600,000 euro per month, per year. So this is all participation result. So what did it help at the end? It just privileged some people to be more privileged under the name of more equality. And this is the same as I always said in socialism. In socialism, everybody is equal, just a few are much more equal than the others.
Thanks. Tobias, please.
Yes, so also want to go to the, I start with the sustainability. Yes, the demographic change set all pension systems under pressure, it's true. But there are many possibilities to work on it. The first is to enlarge the time you are in the job. So we did it in Germany. We will do it again in 10 years. So we're not at the end. We will reach 67 in 2028, and then we have to discuss the next step. As we founded the German Rentenversicherung and Pension Insurance, the entry age to participate from the insurance was 65. At this time, the usual age you die was also 65, so it was good for the insurance. Now something changed, but you can also work on the productivity, and you can also, and this is what I said before, personal performance. It's not the state who is for 100% responsibility for your pensions. Also the people and the workers have our own responsibility to care about their pensions, and the state have also to frame this, and we are doing this in Germany. So yes, it's a challenge, but it's possible. The next was agriculture. Yeah, we disagree. So I think I don't want to have a full market in strategic sectors, what means defense, aerospace, space, because it's important for Europe and also for Germany. As a German politician, we have the capability to protect ourselves. So is there a free market and we all purchase abroad from Europe? This could be. I want to avoid this. So yes, we need a free market, but with some regulations and also with some framing. And in specific branches, we need a clear state-driven economy. A clear state-driven economy. Yeah. And the second, participation. I fully disagree. I fully disagree. Yes, we had these scandals. I can tell you, and I'm not from the Socialist Party, I'm from the Conservative Party, and I was my whole life, I was never a member in the Workers' Union, and I was always beside the 2 years as a vocational training, I was always in the leadership of a company. Yeah? But I learned during this financial crisis in Germany, if you compare France with Germany, the strike days in France, with the strike days in Germany, there's no country in Europe with so less strike days, because we can avoid this before. We don't go in the stupid fight to stop, and I, working in a European company, I have an office in Paris and one in Toulouse. The last 3 months to travel to Toulouse or Paris or come back, it was a shit, sorry. So, it will never happen in Germany. Will never happen in Germany. So it never happened in Germany. I never in maybe depends on our different experience. In my
train driver strikes.
Yes, one week.
No.
1 week. For me it was 1 week. So this was two.
I think we need to.
3 years ago was 1 week.
Shortly,
now
shortly.
3 months. 3 months in France. So I disagree with our. We have a very, I think, a very smart approach of participation. Yes, there are some scandals. We have the same scandals on the employer side as well, because we always work discussing councils, and the participation means there's a part of the
council, okay.
Yes, and so we have to yeah, it's not the same, the Workers' Council with what we discussed before, the Betriebsverfassungsgesetz, the Mitbestimmung in the Board of Directors, but it's necessary, and I think for the German economy, and especially under the financial crisis, we had the possibility to reduce the labor cost, we had the possibility to reduce the time, we could very easily reduce or very easily face the challenge, and I think, and if you look at the figures and the numbers, I think we managed it very well. And one part was I believe in participation. I think it's a smart idea. It's not the driver of the economy, but it's a part of the social economy market in Germany. Last point, social justice. Yes, that's true, but in my keynote I said there is no social market economy in Europe, because I can only speak about countries. If there is no common labor market, I don't see a common labor market. We have it's one of the freedoms, yes, but there is no common market because we have no common regulation. There is no common economy full because we have no common economy setting beside some regulations. I believe in justice on a national base. We have justice. In Germany, you can say we have justice, but I don't believe on the target of equality. I don't believe. It's impossible, because we all are different. I think you heard this on the panel as well. We all are different. Equality is a wrong target.
Okay, so I think we need to close it, right? Yeah. I have a very strict lady over there, so I cannot, I just have to give you some conclusions. So I would say three things. The first thing is that we have discovered, some of us already knew it, that the concept is very ambiguous, and it has changed its meaning throughout time. It was born as a neoliberal concept. It has become a synonym for the welfare state. So that's a pretty long journey. The second part, we could not deepen our discussion that much, but I think it's important. There is no agreement on regarding the role that the European level should play in the future of the social market economy. The European Pillar of Social Rights, I mean, there was skepticism on this side. There is no such thing as a social market economy in Europe. Instead, Gabriele was much more open to that notion. And the third point is that there are some differences that I'm afraid we will never be able to reconcile, because they have to do with basic values. I mean, the difference between those who believe in market, individual freedom, and those who believe in equality, fairness, regulation. And here I think the three speakers were along the spectrum. Like Gabriele would be on one end, Gunther would be on the other end, and the balanced, not necessarily the right, but the balanced, the middle way would be Tobias. So thank you all very much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the event.